I sent you a message to I asked to come on here to argue with Dan because I completely disagree with him. 100% disagree with him on his take on the paddlers getting left behind, on the boundaries versus designated launches. Disagree with all of it. And this is coming from a guy, I've been doing this since 2011, fishing kayak tournaments. And I was a paddle guy, won a lot of tournaments paddling, probably won more tournaments paddling than I have pedaling or motoring. And I was anti-pedal when the pedal drives came out. No pedal drives, get out of here, And then when the motors started coming around, I was like, that's too far. We don't need motors. And now I've had a motorboat too. So I think that's all just part of the wave of I hate to call it progress, but these people aren't in this sport to become kayakers. They're bass fishermen. So the paddle was just a nuisance until something better came along. That's kind of how I felt about it.
I think what I do think is that I don't call what we do now, even though we call it kayak fishing and the podcast is Bass, Kayak, and Beers. When we get down to tournaments, when we start adding pedal drive, and then motors, pedal drives kind of change it from being man-powered to motor-powered, technology driven. And when you look at, live scope for fishing, I'm not against any of it. I'm not against progress, if that's what it is. I just reluctantly call it kayak fishing because that's what everybody's calling. But I don't view it as we're no longer doing kayak fishing. To me, the essence of kayak fishing was gone a couple of years ago. That's my take on it. Not that I'm hating on it. Again, I'm not hating on the progress. I'm super happy with the way kayak fishing has progressed. If you want to still call it kayak fishing, when you think about kayak fishing, was invented in somewhere in, I think it was Sweden, hundreds of years ago. Obviously, rods and reels weren't around by that time, but ancestors used it for like hunting and all that. It was paddle and a kayak, and that remained unchanged for like hundreds of years until recently. It's not even recognizable anymore as far as what it originally started with.
Right.
That part I agree with.
Yeah, I mean, we're fishing from small plastic watercraft, and I know they're still sold as kayaks, branded as kayaks. Johnny just said, I saw in the comments there, but these guys, I mean, if you go out and ask these guys about paddle stroke technique or how to manage current in a kayak paddling or something, nobody, I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm guessing 80-90% of the people in these tournaments wouldn't have a clue about that. They just have a paddle because they have to have one. They're out there to fish. So now on the other side of that, what Dan was saying, talking about you're leaving the little guy behind, so on and so on. The little guy still has a chance, even with the defined launches. And I know he disagrees with that too. We can talk about the launches later. They still have a chance. It's just, do you want to attack? It's going to be a lot more work, but you have a chance. I mean, Russ Snyder's is top 10 in the BOS right now. He paddles.
Russ Snyder paddles?
He paddles an attack for the BOS events. He has a Torpedo for the bass events.
He doesn't use a pedal drive. He's no longer using the name. Really?
No, when I fished with him on Caddo, he launched with me and he took off in that attack paddling. Now he may have a different, he may have a radar that he pedals sometimes too. I don't know, but he does paddle some because he did it at Caddo. I saw him do it. And he's in that top 10. And Drew has won the BOS. This was pre rule change.
Well, yeah, that was pre rules. Yeah.
Some other guys like on Dardanelle a couple years ago, a guy won the BOS event paddling. Paddling is still a thing. It's kind of like the Keith Poche thing in the Bass Elites or the Opens. You can win it in a small boat. You're going to get beat to death on the big water. You're going to get beat to death on the main lake. If you're willing to sacrifice a lot of stuff and do some things, you can still have success in a small boat or in a paddle boat. In our case, a paddle kayak. It's just going to be a lot more work. I don't think they're left behind. I just think you're leaving yourself behind if you choose to stay in a paddle kayak. That's what I think.
No, I agree with you on some of that. I do think that it severely handicaps a paddler. That's the honest truth. Why do you think it was? And first of all, I agree with the rule changes. I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not disagreeing. I'm not debating this point. And fishing is live. I'll get to that question in a moment. The question that I have you posted there. But before that, why was the need for the rule changes in your mind?
Well, it's one thing. we all need to fish the water that's on the title of the tournament. Like if Lake Dardanelle's the title of the tournament, Lake Dardanelle Bassmaster, let's say, then by God, I think we all ought to stick a foot in that lake at some point during the tournament. And before the rule change, people weren't doing that. People were fishing different ecosystems completely off the lake. And I'm not calling them cheaters because it wasn't against the rules. It's just what they were doing. So that's why the rule needed to be changed. Now, I know that some of the folks think that should have been changed to a boundary within the lake, but I don't like that either. I like the hard designated launches. That's what I like.
Why would you? And again, asking the questions. Why do you like the one? Why do you prefer one versus the other?
Well, I mean, there's so many stories in the past of when it was just public launch. Okay, people, hand roping boats off of bridges and going behind private property and no trespassing areas, and there's no way to police that. Even with boundaries, if you're drawing red lines on a Google map through some woods or across a bridge or across a creek or whatever, you can't dial that in down on ground level necessarily. And then all that land in between that boundary, you're not policing if people are sliding in where they're not supposed to be in those no trespassing areas, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Now, and also the boundaries would never have been good enough. I guarantee you, if they'd have drawn a line around the lake, the people that wanted the boundaries would have said, well, they're not far enough. They're not far enough up Creek X. Yeah. They're not far enough out on this lake. And that would have been a huge problem too. So when you just say, here's your launches, here's 25 launches, have at it. Now we're all on equal playing field. Nobody gets an advantage for having an extra month off to go drive every forest road in the country and find secret put-ins. I mean, for example, now this was before the rule change at the KBF National Championship. There were people getting no trespassing tickets. Police were called on people. I mean, this was happening to people because they were using private areas to access water for the practice time of the tournament to get ready for the tournament. You shouldn't be doing all that. And defined launches cleans it up. It takes out the gray area, completely cleans it up. That's why I like them.
And what about, and I'm, kind of like compromise. What would you say about, okay, let's do designated launches. Let's not do boundaries, but let's allow portaging as long as you launch from the designated boat ramps.
100% agree with that. I wish they would have done that. I think once you put in, if you put in on the lake that we're supposed to be fishing, and if you want to put in the work 3 hours up some creek and drag over trees, I think you should be allowed to do that. They didn't do that, but I wish they would have done that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, that's why I think this is the way I think the misconception is of why the rule changes.